All right, hi. I'm Marcella Roe, and I am going to do a demo today on how to do this painting back here, which I called five-fold. And there's 5 horses, and I'm going to show you how I went about doing that painting. But first I want to talk about some of the supplies that I use. First of all, this is a great time of year to go out and to buy this. This is spider web, but what you want to do is to get the one that's rough. If you get the one that's silky, it does not work, so it has to be rough. I like using this watercolor paper for these. It's you can get it in larger sizes too, but I find this is a really good size. It's Canson watercolor, and it's smooth. You really don't want rough or cold press, even though this is cold press. This is cold press, but it is smooth, and it allows the materials to stick a lot easier than if it was a rough piece. Put that away. I got this little handy bag that comes with 8 watercolor bottles, and I got that at Cheap Joe's. And this is such a nice little container just to take with you with your watercolors. And I am going to show you how to mix these. I use pens to pen. This is the, I know I'm not supposed to say, but this is the cobwebbing that I use, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But first, I want to show you how to mix. So I take one of these bottles, and I use bottled water, and I fill it about halfway. Then I take a tube of paint, and I went out to Hobby Lobby and got Master's Touch, which I found that works really well. But I'm just using, this one is Van Gogh watercolor that I've had for a long time. And I squirt about half the tube into it. Shake it up to where it's all mixed. And this is the watercolor that I use. You can use ink. I've used ink before. There's a couple paintings. This one back here is done with acrylic ink. But I have a tendency to really like the watercolor because I can lift it off. Once the ink goes down, you can't lift the the ink off because it pretty much stays. But with watercolor, you can lift. So, and this is the water, and as you can see, it comes out pretty nice. So, I also use wax paper, and I find that the cheaper the wax paper, the better it works. So I get mine at Dollar General, along with the plastic wrap at Dollar General. And you need a spray bottle, you need sticky things, and I'm not going to tell you, the last election somebody left some signs down the street for like a week, and they didn't come back and get them, so I went and got them. And so I cut them in half, and they make a really good paper. But I won't show you who's the election person, because I saw his signs out again. So I go corner to corner. You don't want to use an awful lot because what it will do is that you get clumps like this. And you want to spread the clumps out because it makes the cobwebbing look a lot better. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is to make sure that the water is sprayed on and the cobwebbing is wet. And try to get it to adhere a little bit to the paper, because when you spray it, when you spray the color on, this cobwebbing is going to attach itself to the paper. I have Payne's Gray. And I have Cerulean Blue. I just started using these two colors. Usually I use bright colors and they mix together, and the red, yellow, and blue just kind of does really neat things like this, or this. And that's using the red, yellows, and blues. But because my picture that I chose is kind of in the blacks and the darks and the blues, let me show you the picture. This is the photograph that I'm using today. I'm cutting out the horses in the background just because they're not necessary unless you want them in. I had one already cut out, but I left it at home. So this is just going to be a quick cut, but you'll get the idea. So this is kind of like the horses that we're going to put on. The best thing to do is to make sure that you have enough paint onto your canvas, your paper, because it dries light. So I really try to load it up. So as you can see, there's a lot of paint on this canvas, on this paper right here. Now I'm going to let this dry overnight. But I already have one. So after you let it dry overnight, and you really don't want, if it's wet, you do not want to take this off, because if you take it off when it's wet, the pattern goes away. There we go. You want to remove as much of the cobwebbing as you can get. There we go. Now I think I'm going to turn it around this way. And actually, I might even do it this way. And give it this time. Give it some more. Because I want to kind of get it in, and you have to use your composition skills too. You know, Papa, Mama, Baby, 3, 5, 7. You know, try to do the 2/3 part. So I'm going to move it down a little bit. So this is kind of the way that it's going to look. And I think it looks pretty good like that. So what I use is matte medium, and there it is. I put a little bit on the plate. And it's just like paint, or just like glue. So I want to make sure that I have a lot of this matte medium on the opposite side of the photograph. And you can see the paper is kind of curling up. It'll lay down once you get it done. I started doing these backgrounds, I bet about 15 years ago. And I just love doing it. At that time, I wasn't as skilled in my drawing and in my painting. I was kind of a newbie at the whole watercolor scene. And this was just a really fun way to be able to produce a really nice painting fairly easy. And but it has turned out that I've kind of perfected it over the years. As you can see, some of my paintings in this, they usually sell right away. So you want to spread it out. It's kind of like wallpapering. You want to make sure there's no bubbles underneath. And I like to go along the edges and make sure that they're sealed down really good. I've had some friends that are really good photographers that have picked this up and have been able to do some of their photographs of their kids and grandchildren, their animals. While I'm at it, I like to seal the whole thing, if I can, unless I want to remove some. Like if I was going to remove like this streak over here, I could lift it off if I wanted to, but I will give it a real, after I'm done coating of this matte medium. I like the matte medium rather than the gloss. It's because it's pliable to have other paints on top of it. It kind of grabs it. So there. Now while that's drying, I want to show you some other backgrounds. Here's a background that I did. Of course, it's got some of the blue on it. This is, I used two colors. I used the greens and the yellows, or the blues and the yellows in this one. And I've used wax paper, plastic wrap on top. And plastic wrap, I have done water. Like if I did a boat scene and I wanted the water, the boat floating in the water, and I used the plastic wrap because you can manipulate it to look like waves. It's really kind of fun. Wax paper kind of makes rocks. And the way that I use the wax paper is that I tear it off of this. I wad it up and I put it on, but I make sure that there's no straight lines, because straight lines really kind of affect the background and doesn't make it look natural. So I want to make sure that there's tears in the wax paper before I put it on. Like this is a really good one right here. But as you can see, it kind of makes it look like rocks. And of course I've put the cobwebbing on. I did that first. And so I put a piece of tape down, because sometimes I do, this is still not dry, and that's what happens when you take it off before it's still dry. My paper is still wet. But sometimes when I'm doing like a series, I will do lines like this, so that I will have the same background on like 2 or 3 if I'm going to do that. So you can see that this is very wet, and it's if it was dry it would be flat, but you can see what happens when you take stuff off when it's wet. You don't want to do that. Okay. Also, some other backgrounds, I thought I would do this while the other part is drying, is that you can use leaves. Now, one of the things you have to choose, and I went outside and I picked this. This is the pears. They're really pretty, and even though they look pretty, they will not do well because they're kind of waxy. So the leaves that you want or the flowers you want, make sure that they are porous, like this. See how, and if you could feel this, this is a lot rougher. It's about the same consistency as the cobweb. And that's going to soak up the watercolor. These won't work, but I wanted to bring these in to show you that if it's slippery and it's soft and kind of waxy, they will not soak the watercolor up. Believe me, I've tried it, because I thought, wow, this is really a cool leaf, but it doesn't work. So we'll put that one away. And I do it the same way. I put down the water. And I have also done it with, put some cobwebbing on this, just for fun. Let's put a little bit. I find doing the cobweb, if you go from corner to corner and then spread it out, it makes a really good webbing design. Now this time I think I'm going to use some bright colors. Let's see, I have a brown somewhere. I've mixed these all from just watercolor paints. And sometimes if you get them on sale, you know, you can make a tube, you can make a bottle of this for like $3 or $4 versus $15 to $20 if you buy it straight out. And I find it works just as good. Since it's the fall of the year, and also you have to, sometimes I have to take these out and just take them apart and soak them, which this one's not working very well. We'll try another one here. let's put some blue with it. And that's blue and yellow is going to make some green. I teach my granddaughter. We're just learning our colors and how they mix. So I want to make sure that I have a lot of paint onto this before I start adding the leaves. And again, do the Papa, Mama, Baby, the 3, 5, 7, 9. So here's a big one. Let's just... That's pretty cool. I think I want some down here, floating around. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you can get your leaves kind of moist, not dry like, you know, fall, they will adhere a little bit better. But you can see now, the one thing that I know that you need to do in order to keep the leaves flat is you have to put something on top of them. So I'm going to do the wax paper. Depending on the room, when you put wax paper on this, it takes an awful lot longer to dry. So this here would probably take maybe a day and a half before I could really open it up. And I have taken it out and put it in the sun, and it collects moisture underneath. So it really has to dry, air dry, slow, just kind of like a good brisket, you know, low and slow. So you can see that. And I have a couple backgrounds here. I don't know whether anybody else is, but I'm always messy when I do art. It just kind of is me. I would love to be organized and not so messy, but I just can't do it. So you can see here, I put, this was a fern leaf that I put in. I didn't have very many examples of the leaf, but this is one, and after you're done, you pull it off, and this is what happens. So you can see the leaf that you can put on that. Here's another background. And another one. This one here I put wax paper on top of. So, and that's what makes these rocks. Then I started to experiment. I haven't finished this one, but this is a, I went to the BVI in Tortula, and this was the scene that was outside my window. So I haven't finished this, but I thought, you know, I'm going to try it as the background. So that's what I've done. This was rocks here. That was, it was like a rock wall, and then there was rocks in the ocean, and then this was the ocean, and then there was mountains in the background. So so you can kind of get an idea of what you want to do, and you can do rocks and mountains and such. If you look at this up here, This was rocks. This was a lighthouse and the rocks. And I used wax paper to make that look like that. So, I think our horse is kind of dry. So we're going to get back to this. Now, I used some of the extra tubes. Let me clean up a little bit here. Get this out of the way. I used some of the spare tubes that I've put onto the background in the colors, and I'm going to use these colors in order to finish this. So, now what I do is that I paint up into the painting. I like to say that you take the background and bring it into the foreground. I like using Payne's gray rather than black because it just kind of gives it a more natural looking. I think that if you are just a beginner and you really like the process of watercolor, this is a really good way to start. This kind of gives you a success, and believe me, when you're starting watercolor, you need successes. And I love the transparency rather than acrylic of the watercolor, because as you can see, I can paint over this and yet I'm still getting some of the background. And that's what is so nice about watercolor, especially the transparent watercolor. Somebody asked me about gouache, but I haven't heard really good things about gouache. I actually, and I don't know whether this is true, but somebody said that gouache fades a lot. And so the pigment that's in watercolor won't do that. Of course, if I have more time, I go back and I will tweak this a little bit. But that kind of gives you an idea on how to use the backgrounds in a painting, and also how to use backgrounds. You can use many things as your backgrounds. Go around your house and look for porous things, sponges and salt, and never used flour, but maybe, I don't know. Experiment and have fun. Thank you very much and have a great day.